Welcome to FemLead, the podcast on female leadership and role models. This show aims to inspire and equip you with the tools you need to navigate your career plans. FemLead brings inspiring career perspectives and strategies to guide your path to success. Your host, Alexandra, will interview role models on new, exciting topics with each episode. If you like what you hear, give us a review and subscribe to the show on your preferred streaming platform. Enjoy.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Family Podcast. A new season started a few months ago, but we already have so many amazing stories shared. So I really hope you enjoyed the season about career breakthrough, because today we have yet another special guest. Today's guest is the General Manager and VP of Products at HubSpot. She has more than a decade of experience leading global customer, product, and engineering teams. She launched products and built high-performing teams across enterprise software-as-a-service companies and is known for scaling emerging businesses. Poorvi Shrivastav is passionate about education, technology, and culture, and is an investor and advisor for multiple educational and software organizations. She holds a Bachelor in Computer Science Engineering from India and an MBA in Strategic Management from the Wharton School. Without further ado, let's welcome today Poorvi. Hello, Poorvi, and welcome to FemLead. It's really an honor to have you here. How are you today? Thank you for making it. Tell us more about how your day is going.
Thank you for having me. My day is going fantastically well. It's a nice spring Monday in California, and I'm excited to do some good product work.
Yes, well, I'm super excited to deep dive into your product career. We both work in the same field, and we actually follow each other's work on LinkedIn. And I was so happy when we got to this point where we could schedule the interview to discuss your amazing career, because I think you also have a lot of advice for people that look into establishing that career. And I'm very, very interested myself in hearing your advice. But then for this interview, we agreed that we will deep dive directly on the first question on what is success. So I would like to ask you, Poorvi, what do you consider that makes a career successful?
That's a very deep question, Alexandra. So I'm going to take some time to unpack my answer with this one. And I want to start with core values. My core values are integrity, determination, and impact. And I hold these values really close to my heart and mind, both at work and in life. Integrity, because I value honesty and transparency in relationship and communication. It helps to not have multiple versions of the same story. It makes life simpler to remember the one version, which is the truth. Determination, because since childhood, I've lived and grown up in a family of academicians or academics who value giving up 100% to anything over that, even if the outcome is not favorable. So I don't know of any other way to approach things. If I'm taking up a role, a position, a project, I want to run in all of those lanes. I'm all in, else I don't think I'd do it. And then finally, impact, because I've always believed people remember you through how you made them feel in that moment, and not necessarily how big of a title you had, how much money you made, or how many people you managed. So I want to ensure I reach a position without compromising on these three core values, where I can impact people's life positively on a broad scale. And on that path, I'm continuously opening doors. And I don't forget that I'm opening doors for people who don't have a seat at the table today. And in this process, I also build up financial security for my family and a wealth of knowledge for me. That I truly believe would be a career successful.
You mentioned so many keywords that many of the listeners are like, I have 20% of that, I have 50% of that, I have 80% of that. So my follow-up question on success is, when was a point where you felt you are able to bring everything together? Because starting by, first of all, you don't know all of the things that you know now about your career. I'm sure since the beginning of your career, you didn't know it will be all of these different things that need to fit in together. So when was that moment, or how did it come about?
Yeah, I think for that, maybe I would have to go a little bit into my story. So I'll start with my story, and then I'll point out if there was a specific moment, I think it was a phase when things actually start coming to you and you make sense of the pieces of the puzzles that had been collecting for a long time. So my story is very simple and rather the story of a lot of immigrants in US. I was born in India, but I grew up all over the world before moving to America. My parents, as I said, valued academic and excellence of character over everything else. I grew up acing any standardized test I've ever taken, and that's not to boast. It's just the only way I knew how to survive and grow. Um, Started my career at Microsoft back in the aftermath of the financial crisis of 08, 09. And that was the first year Microsoft recruited from my university, and I was one of the first ones. So that was really an opportunistic moment. I will forever be thankful for it. And then all hell broke loose with the crash in 09. I was offered a role to lead customer service and operations because my engineering role had been downsized. And I unwillingly did that at the beginning of my career. So I worked 5 a.m. shifts every day for a year. And I think through that experience, I learned to manage people. I learned to balance empathy and outcomes. Did that for close to a year. That was really a pivotal moment to understand that things might not always work my way. I might not always have the top spot. I might not always have the best brand on my resume, but I will always have the learnings in that moment from that experience. So that was a big moment. And then thereafter, I went back to engineering at Microsoft. I did engineering management, product, and I was there for close to 7 years. Post Microsoft, I wanted to learn and expand my community. So I went to business school at Wharton. And in hindsight, I find it really ironic because I'm a rigid introvert. Like I'm an extrovert only if the group is less than 4 people. And Wharton being such a big school, thousands of people, it was really nerve-wracking for me. But I found my crew, I found my people, and it was a great experience, learned a lot. And that was another pivotal moment when I learned to appreciate knowledge, just not in my own vertical, like computer science or business, but also like these other phenomenal things that were happening in healthcare, in education, education policy, through my classmates. So that's the second moment when I learned to connect the dots between what I am doing and what others are doing to build up a higher scale process or a higher scale system or a better team. That cross-functional knowledge aspect that came in through my business school experience. And then I went to Salesforce because I really wanted to work on the intersection of business, technology, and at a company who had ambitious and bold plans. And Salesforce fit the bill. I was there again for close to 5 years and ran product for a number of businesses. And then I wanted to focus on another nuanced aspect of life, which is culture. And how do you build a culture that your grandchildren, as we say at HubSpot, can be proud of? How do you build products that are very easy to love, which you don't have to sell, but they sell by themselves? And that is when HubSpot happened, and I'm tremendously grateful that it did. So I took the GM role at HubSpot a year and a half ago, and that was the third pivotal moment when I decided that this leg of my career is going to be purely focused on culture, people, and building organizations.
Wow, it's also a very it's a career built on years of learning a specific, or like having a couple of years where you perfect a craft within a company that really offers you maybe some opportunities to grow within, go to conferences, go to business school, and so on. And I do have a question about moving up the ladder, if you will allow me to ask, because you said empathy and outcome as keywords in the beginning of your career. And I was curious if you can tell us more about what do you think is the percentage when you move up the ladder, when you need to be aware of empathy versus outcome, or well, basically your skills that would recommend you for the role. How do you know that now it's time to have a conversation with your manager? How do you know that now it's time to move forward? Tell us a little bit about your experience there.
Yeah, absolutely. So Firstly, the ladder. The ladder is an interesting word. I tell you this from my experience, I really don't think it's a ladder. I think it's a pyramid. Because those who climb at an angle and who take the time to develop the nuances and the skills in that role, um, and build those skills are people who reach the tip of the pyramid. It could be a ladder for a lot of other people, but I've always looked at it as a pyramid. And that's why I think it's important to spend the time in the role, honing the skills that are required for you to take up a broader set of responsibilities. So in terms of what percentage, I don't know if there is an exact percentage of outcomes and empathy, but I would say this: as you go up, you have to master the skill of balancing context with control. And that is even more nuanced for females and even more nuanced for like senior female leaders. Where do you have to be very context driven versus where you have to assert a little bit of control to guide the decision in a particular direction, because you can be debating the decision for a year. So I think that skill is very helpful. Can you ask for promotions? I always encourage people to think about what is needed for them to get to the next level, and if they're ready, why they're ready. And if they think they're ready and the manager thinks they're ready, they should have the conversation for sure. If the manager thinks there is a gap, they should discuss the context behind the gap. The why in all of this is so much more important than when, because you could be put up for promotion 3 times a year and be rejected 3 times a year. And that's something that I personally don't do for my teams unless we both agree that this is the right time. So I'd 100% encourage people to ask for promotions, but after you think you are ready, not because someone else got promoted who's in adjacent role to you. I think that I discourage people to do, because it's not a real barometer of success in the long term of the pyramid.
Definitely. So wise. I love that. It seems when you discuss the different steps in your career, first of all, there's so much clarity in what you say. Yeah, you just mentioned all of these keywords, and I'm so happy you are so clear about what are the steps or the instances that brought you to where you are now, in your opinion, and how you reflected on your career, because that's not something that everybody is able to do even after several years of experience. And as you said, it's about honing your skills, and it's about taking the time to perfect these nuances. And to wrap up this subject of your career progression that I think everybody's interested to hear more about, what are then the differences when you are, or what are some things where you feel women should be more aware once they reach leadership or senior leadership? Are there some things where you feel like, okay, here I had to pay more attention to?
Yeah, I would point towards 2 things. One is definitely balancing context and control and honing that skill really well, so you know which one comes in handy in which situations. The second is, especially for senior female leaders, I think it's important for them to listen. It's important for anyone to listen, but especially important for them to listen before responding, because people expect female leaders, for good or for worse, to have very empathy driven mindset. And if you're a good listener, you are in the moment, you are able to provide that value for your teams, for your organization. So I think listening is it's a very easy skill if you think about it that way. Yeah, I'm able to listen to anybody, but it's a very crucial skill to have in critical discussions, critical decisions. And that's what I encourage people on my team to do, to listen before they speak and present their opinions, because then it'll be very clear on why you're saying what you're saying. So I think those 2 skills will come in very handy.
Very, very cool. I want to follow up with your advice for our listeners who are now at the beginning of their careers, or in the first 5 years of their careers. What do you advise them to look for?
Yeah, so for people starting their careers, I would say value 2 things. Value who are you working with and who are you learning from? And second is how much can you learn in that period? over titles and how quickly you can move up to the pyramid. As you travel through the pyramid, you'd realize those two things: your skills and your network is one of the most important aspects of your career. So build that when you still have time. So that would be my advice.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Poorvi. A lot of advice in 15 minutes so far. So I'm super happy that you give us now the time, because I'm sure there's even more coming. So let's talk a little bit about mentorship, because mentorship is an essential part of your story. And we are trying here to inspire and help listeners in their quest for professional fulfillment. So where do we start with finding a mentor? And how do you think we should approach our career path, knowing that basically mentorship is key to becoming a better person?
Yeah. So, one of the most interesting things about mentorship is it's a two-way road, like both in terms of interest and exchange of skills and knowledge, and even sometimes motivation. I often see folks asking to be mentored without knowing why someone would be a good mentor. Is there a connection? And how will both parties benefit from this process? Very honestly, for me, I've had both formal mentors through various programs that I was part of in my in my runs at Microsoft, Salesforce, and now HubSpot. And outside, these people who I've worked with and connected on social platforms or through conferences, and a group of those have taken over the role of my personal board of advisors, I call them, which I'm tremendously thankful for. I think the thing to understand is that you have to prove your value 10x to a person before you start asking for their advice. This is like sort of the unsaid rule. You have to provide more value before you start getting the value back. So I encourage folks to not go after, like, again, big titles and senior leaders for mentorship. Anyone who's a step or two beyond you, or anyone who's actually even adjacent to you in a different role, can be a great mentor. In fact, the role of peer mentors is so critical when you go up the pyramid. And think about it, the people that are with you today, who are working alongside you, are going to be the CEOs and the CESOs and the CPOs of tomorrow. When you do reach that level, and you'd want advice from what's working in their company versus what you want to make work in your company. So that's why I say, like, don't go for half an hour with the CEO, go for like 5 hours of support with like someone who's more inclined and has been in the role recently as you are. So in short, invest in other people before they invest in you. And second, find those like-minded individuals to set up your personal board of directors for mentorship.
Very, very straight to the point, and also very knowledgeable of what really works from your experience. So I'm super happy that we covered that as well. Let's talk next about women in leadership, because that was something we really wanted to touch upon. How can we support more this endeavor of having more women in leadership? And also, maybe if you want to share more about your experience now at HubSpot, I think it would really help people understand how things are now at your career path.
Yeah, I'll start with HubSpot. My experience has been phenomenal. We have a board and a C-suite, which is approximately 50% women. I don't know of many other organizations who are or aim to be in that spot. My personal experience has been quite amazing. I think my dream was to walk in a conference room, and the discussion and the engagement is so that I don't have to really think about male versus female in that room. So both in terms of quantity and quality of female leadership, HubSpot has invested a lot across the board, right from recruiting to growing and to retaining female talent. I think, how can we support this endeavor? We just have to put ourselves out there, do more open mentorship, do more discussion forums, engage more like we are engaging right now on a podcast, and open it up for women. I think one thing that we lack, specifically in female leaders, senior female leadership, is once a lot of us like reach that seat, or we get that seat at the table, we forget that there are others waiting in queue to come into that room. And it's not easy once you are in that position, but that's what you have to keep reminding yourself, that I have to leave the seat for someone else to come in, someone who's not got a chance till then. So I think that specifically I try to be very mindful of. to get more people into the room who've not had that privilege that I have been able to get at this point.
Fantastic. Very good points. And speaking of that, I feel like when we discuss career paths, and obviously this podcast is focused on advancing women in leadership and giving advice and sharing role models, we also need to be aware of the fact that there is this subject of difficult conversations that sometimes we don't discuss about. In anybody's career, they have to have sometimes some difficult conversation. There are difficult situations you need to manage. You need to be empathic, and you know to know all of these different points of contact to ask for advice. But how would you say we should approach, in general, difficult conversations in our career path?
Yeah, that's a great question. Going into a difficult conversation where there is a natural tension or discomfort, I think one needs to be very clear about A, what is going on, B, why it's important, C, the different options on the table, and 4, what are the pros and cons of each option. I know this probably sounds very mathematical and formula driven, but unless you yourself are clear on those 4 things, you'd not be able to provide that crystal clarity to the other party. And then the second thing, once you're clear on those things, is being ready for debate and discussion, but also disagreeing and committing. One of the principles that we have at HubSpot is we debate a lot, we participate in all discussions, but once we have made that commitment to a decision, we all rally behind it. It might not be a decision maybe like I'm personally in favor of or someone else's, but we've made that decision as a company, and then it's all unanimous. And that helps moving forward effectively once you've had that discussion. So I'd say that those 2 things are important when you're in a crucial conversation. Have clarity of perspective on why you're there, what you're debating, and what are the options on the table. And second, like, have your thoughts, like you have opinions, but have them loosely held. So if the discussion does go in a different direction, you are able to commit. And those 2 things have been helpful for me. And I'd love to know, like, when the podcast comes out and you get some feedback from the viewers, what has been helpful for other people?
Definitely. I mean, we give a lot of advice here that we say, write us or contact us 6 months later and tell us how did it go, because everything we discuss here is quite complex, and it's a very personal journey to talk about your career path and then expect me to have the same path. It's not going to happen. So the chances of having a copy of your career, Poorvi, are quite maybe in the future there are chances of meeting each other at conferences, but it's not going to be the same trajectory, right? So definitely feel free to write us or tell us more about how you implemented this, and maybe if there were any other reflections about this topic that is very important to tackle. Culture, conversation, roles, those are things that evolve also as we progress. So I'm very happy you mentioned that, because I would like for our listeners to tell us their experience. And speaking of culture, I would like to tell everyone that Poorvi did have a very genuine way of sharing now the scope of her role. And you did mention, Poorvi, that it is essential if we invest in people, processes, and products to grow strong leaders for tomorrow. And those are 3 important parts. But I would also like to look into each of these points and explain, how do you see us investing in the leaders of tomorrow from the people, process, and product perspective?
Yeah, I've been saying this for a long time now. I think businesses, for them to grow and innovate, they need these 3 things. They need products or services that are easy to use, easy to buy, and easy to love, as what we call at HubSpot. They need systems and processes that make up for communication gaps and help scale the company. Because as you're scaling, there will be communication gaps. You'll not be able to communicate one-on-one to everyone. And then third, the most important part of this is people who are committed to the mission, to the culture, and to the growth, and are willing to stick through the long road with you. As companies invest in these 3 areas, they form the foundation for transparent, growth-oriented, and empathetic leadership. So people in these roles, so leaders, can optimize for company and customers above their team and above themselves. And when that happens, as a leader, you're clear what you're optimizing for. You're going for customers, you're going for company. team, and then yourself, and then the reward system is going to be also following the same model, you are aligned to do your best work every day, because what you're working on and what you'd be rewarded with is kind of the same thing. And that's how I think it helps people grow through the leadership ranks. It helps people become successful as leaders of tomorrow.
Very, very wise, and also, as I said, very clear. So I think everybody has some notes to take and put that into practice. Thank you, Poorvi, for following up on this question. Something else that I wanted to touch upon that is obviously part of your role is building healthy cultures. And well, you did mention that in the beginning, but what do you see as pillars for success in building a healthy culture?
You'd see me doing this like 3-point answers a lot, because in my mind, I've always thought about things like, if I can boil this problem down to like 3 successive areas that we can focus on, we can solve the problem. So a healthy culture, in my opinion, stems from 3 things. Number 1 is a sense of purpose and shared values. You have to have that at the core of our organization. Number 2 is a clear idea of priorities and focus on what you're working towards for this year, next year. And number 3 is a system to help drive decision-making when you have so many actors in the room. Now, as long as the company provides guidelines for each of these 3 areas and continuously reassess and iterate on the status quo, they are building and enhancing what I call an equitable and growth-oriented culture. At HubSpot, we have our culture code, which we are tremendously proud of. We have our shared values, which are, we say it's a heart. So humble, empathetic, adaptable, remarkable, and transparent. And then we continuously work to iterate as we grow on what else can we add to our culture that will help us grow forward and keep our people happy. So I think a mix of those 3 things, purpose, shared values, clear priorities and focus, and a system to deliberate decision-making and help drive decision-making is what I feel define a healthy culture.
Is there one of the 3 that you feel it's, if you don't have that, it's like not gonna, if you don't start with that, or if it's not the focus in the beginning, it's not gonna work?
I think purpose and shared values, because that's like key foundational to why someone would be interested to work in a particular company. Like that's the reason I came to HubSpot. I'm sure millions of other people did. As customers, as employees, and as partners. But I think that's like P1 in terms of priorities, getting a sense of what you're driving towards, why you exist, and why is it different from someone else.
Definitely. Wow, you shared a lot of advice, and everything is very straight to the point, because you did have a reflection on your career, and obviously you did spend the time to, as you said, focus on those nuanced skills, and you had quite a incredible growth in all these large companies. And I was wondering if, looking back, would you do anything differently?
Yeah, looking back, I'd really not push myself so hard in my initial years, or like not running as fast as few other peers were running at that point in time. As I'm growing my skills and responsibilities and even like maturity in life, I realized that knowledge and people are the most important factors in my career and to other careers as well. And titles and social and political capital will change. Someone I think today is not in a great spot with respect to their careers can accelerate in the next 2 years. And someone who's doing fantastically well today can stay status quo. So I now anchor on things that I can control, which is building knowledge and people. And I wish, I did anchor on those super early in my career as well.
Definitely. It's very interesting that you say that, and I'm happy you do share it, because it's not the first time I'm hearing this answer about giving yourself the time to figure out what's right without putting too much pressure on yourself. And this is also the, I would say, the focus of youth now and young people going into the workspace, that should I be faster? Should I be better? Should I progress, every 2 years by default, or should I take it easy and figure out what's going on there? And it's interesting and reassuring when someone else tells you, if you don't have everything figured out, you're going to be fine either way. It's not the end of the world. So definitely something for our audience to consider as well. Let's go then into the final 5 fire questions. So I will start by asking you, what is one book you think everyone should read?
Everyone is a very broad customer target segment, but I will say To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. It's one of my favorite childhood books. And I think it's a wonderful book for witnessing life through the lens of a child, a parent, just a human being.
Fantastic. Thank you. What is the best piece of advice you have ever received?
The balance of context and control is critical in life.
Very nice. Who is your role model?
External role models keep on changing as I've grown and now appreciate character and qualities differently than I used to. But my parents, my dad for his admirable commitment and sincerity to his work, and my mother for her commendable spirit to compromise her career aspiration for ours, something I don't think I will ever do. So really, those people define character and skill sets in life for me.
Thank you. If you were to have another career, what would you choose to do?
I have oscillated between a writer, a stand-up comedian, and a dancer. I haven't picked one. So with those three, I think I have a solid backup plan if tech doesn't work out.
Well, that's fantastic. I love that all of them are in the arts entertainment industry. So there's a backstory there of how, if tech doesn't work, like you said, there's always a plan B. Fantastic. And last question, if you could change places with someone, who would it be and why?
After the last couple of weeks, I'd say Elon Musk. I just want to know how decision-making happens in his brain. So yeah, I'll probably want to be in his brain for a few hours.
Yeah, very, very interesting. And also the times we're living are very interesting. So great question to ask ourselves, definitely. Poorvi, you've been so grateful with your time and with your advice. I want to thank you for taking the time. We have been very, very condensed in the advice that you shared, and I hope that it helps our audience with making some decisions, but also considering maybe a bit their career path, reflecting on it and asking those questions about what are the values, what are the steps, what are the processes they should definitely have to progress. And I want to thank you for taking the time and for joining us here at FemLead. I hope you had a good time as well.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate what you're doing for the community, and that's how we'll progress, by learning from each other.
Definitely. And thank you all for listening today. I hope you had fun like we enjoyed this interview, and stay tuned for more updates with the incredible female role models.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of FemLead Podcast. Share the news with your friends and follow us on social media at FemLead Podcast everywhere.